FanDuel is just recently released its way too early preseason odds for the SEC. And I have my thoughts on them. Now, I love FanDuel. We know we love FanDuel. We have the partnership with FanDuel. But there are definitely some teams that I think I'm a little bit more weary on than others. Real quickly, the teams that we won't be discussing, you have Kentucky coming in at plus 3,000 odds, 5,000 odds for Mississippi State. Vanderbilt at plus 30,000. Yeah, plus 30,000 odds. My apologies. Arkansas plus 12,000 odds. And Auburn at plus 3,500. Okay, now on to the actual teams. Texas at plus 210. I understand that seems a little high. I completely get it, and we're all going to put pressure on Arch Manning to have to deliver. And that's going to be the narrative around this. Well, you're putting all this hype around Arch. What if he doesn't deliver? That to me is not the case when you look at Texas at plus 210, the favorites in the SEC. It's more so giving credit to Steve Sarkisian and his staff. They're losing Quinn Ewers, 4 offensive linemen, 4 receivers, multiple defensive players, including a Jim Thorpe Award-winning defensive back in Jahdae Barron, multiple defensive linemen, and nobody is really nervous out there. You talk to people in Austin, they're excited about spring football to kickstart year 2 in the SEC. So many people are believing that this team is only getting started, and largely it's due to the fact of what they've been able to bring in the transfer portal, the recruiting trail, and retaining staff members. Kyle Flood's not going anywhere. AJ Milby, the quarterback coach, isn't going anywhere. Those who run the practices and ensure that everyone is prepared aren't going anywhere. And Sark has done a good job of prioritizing the offensive and defensive line play over the last 2 years in the Big 12 to where when they stepped foot in the SEC, I try to warn people and say, don't doubt Texas. But they're coming from the Big 12, Cole. How can you be? Well, because they were masquerading as a Big 12 team. They really were built to be in the SEC a year prior, which is why they went to Atlanta, which is why they went to the college football playoff, and why they went down to the wire against Ohio State. They were built in the trenches. They have a top 5 recruiting class returning, a number 1 recruiting class coming on in, solid defense headlined by All-American talents like Ant Hill, Colin Simmons, Mookie Taft. You also realize that the pieces in play are only going to get better with time offensively. So DeAndre Moore, who was a wide receiver 4, is going to have to step on up as a wide receiver 2. And I believe he can. Ryan Wingo was right alongside Cam Coleman and Ryan Williams. And you can throw in Jeremiah Smith for top-tier talent of the 2024 recruiting class. He's going to be a legit number 1 potentially. You also are going to bring in more players via the portal. And the home and away matchups, you just switch some things up. Ohio State now replaces Michigan. It's the same schedule, and you went 11-1 in. I think this team is too good in personnel to fail on paper. And Steve Sarkisian, he's due. If Ryan Day can win a national championship, Steve Sarkisian can get the job done. I'm not doubting Texas. I understand why plus 210 is the reason. I also understand why Georgia at plus 390 is the reason. It's a tad low for my liking, if I'm just being completely honest, which means you should probably take the odds now because they'll be better in your favor with it. I get it. I understand why we are talking about Georgia as plus 390. It's a new quarterback. It's a bunch of new weapons. It's a new offensive line. It's 6 new defensive starters. But can we also just put pause on the whole narrative? It's Georgia. Like at this point, the way that we talked about Nick Saban and Alabama every single year, showing on up to Atlanta, red carpet rolled on out. That's Georgia. Until proven otherwise, why are we going to doubt them? They're a company that feels like the one that people will apply to while still trying to get the promotion at their current job. Because that's how much people believe in the process. They know if they join this company, they're going to be better off and be able to retire early because of who is in running the CEO, who is the CFO, who is the COO. Glenn Schumann creates linebackers like no one's business. Kirby Smart, exceptional when it comes to recruiting. Phenomenal playmaker. Everything that you want to see when it comes to the X's and O's, he's got down. He's going to be fine on the offensive line. They're bringing in brand new players. And the other thing that's really, really important is that it's been 2 years since Georgia played for a national championship with teams that I would say are, when fully healthy, good enough to win it all. Don't kid yourself and tell me that if you had Carson Beck playing in that Notre Dame matchup against the Sugar Bowl, it wouldn't have been closer. I think it would have. I think that Georgia probably still would have lost, but it would have been closer. Tell me in 2023, if they beat Alabama, they're not a three-peat dynasty. Sorry, I don't believe it. Now you got them pissed off. Now you got everybody inside that building pissed off. They know what the expectations are. They know what the goals are. So long as Zachariah Branch and Noah Thomas can hit it at wide receiver, plus you return Oscar Delp, Nate Frazier, whoever is your starting quarterback, for now, I'm going to say it's Gunnar Stockton. And maybe like a young guy, CJ Wiley or Talon Taylor hits. Yeah, good luck college football. Georgia's not slowing down. You can almost guarantee that they're punching their ticket to Atlanta. Now, the next 4 teams are really interesting to me, and every single one of them has a fault. Let's start with Tennessee at plus 700. I'm at a crossroads with Tennessee. I really am. Because I like Tennessee. I like what the Vols are doing. I believe in Josh Heupel. One hand, everything that they have laid down in the foundation purposes is built for the long run. I think this team is talented. I think this team knows what it needs. I think that they have an identity. I think they want to get back to that identity defensively, which is why they extended Tim Banks last season. I love the pieces they have returning on defense. Yes, you're losing James Pierce. Yes, you're losing your linebacker play, but you still have Boo Carter on the back end. You still have very talented front 7 players that guys were rotational options. They're going to be back. I love the running back group. Peyton Lewis, Deshaun Bishop, one of them could be the next Dylan Sampson, lead the SEC in rushing yards. Plus, you're bringing Star Thomas from Duke. That's a really good foundation in place. And I think that Josh Heupel knows what he wants to run. Go back and look at 2022, the magical season that was when they got the win in the Orange Bowl. Like, that was a team that had an identity on offense, knew it could run the football with ease, knew it could pass, knew that if they were able to get the team to corral the box or their opponents to corral the box, they would take the deep shots. And then you had a Cedric Tillman, you had a Jalen Hyatt, you had Brew McCoy, you had decent tight end play. Your offensive line, headlined by Darnell Wright, also was pretty stable. But that's where we kind of are when it comes to the next part. I like Nico Iamaleava. I think Nico Iamaleava was not the problem down the stretch. You look at where the team struggled, it was at the wide receiver position. It was in pass pro. It was keeping the quarterback upright and not having to run for his life like a chicken with his head cut off. He was actually, by the season's end, one of the better players for Tennessee's offense. And I'm nervous that right now, the offense doesn't have enough pieces to where Nico has to be the guy. He's a great game manager. He'll get you to 10 wins. I have no doubt about that. He'll take you to the college football playoff. But is there that second punch? And what is that second punch? What's the level of juice? Is it the mobility? Is it the fact that he can make plays that were broken up? Is it his ability to call audibles at the line of scrimmage to put the team in better situations? And the thing is that in college football, it's not just a one-man sport. Everyone has to step on up. And the wide receiver room, as much as I think it's good on paper, production-wise, it's very limited. Can Mike Matthews be that number 1 guy going into year 2? Can we see Chris Brazzell take that next step forward? What about Braylon Staley? Or what about Amari Jefferson coming on in from Alabama? Can one of them be a constant threat at number 3, along with Ethan Davis and Miles Kitselman at tight end? Until I see it, it's really hard for me to put my chips all in the pile on Rocky Top rolling in 2025, but I'm not going to doubt them. If you told me they went 9-3 or even 10-2, I could buy it. And the same thing for Alabama at plus 700. It's a one-year fluke for Kalen DeBoer. I understand that there will be a lot of people not wanting to buy the stock into DeBoer because of what we saw last year. 4 losses, 3 of which were almost inexcusable. The Tennessee game, for as much as I want to go ahead and give flack to Jalen Milroe, Tennessee was good enough to go to the college football playoff. You can understand that loss. What about Vanderbilt? How the defense played, especially a week before when you saw the faults and the chinks in the armor when you went up against Georgia and you were up by double digits and then down going into the final 2 minutes. What about the Oklahoma game? What about the Michigan game? The Michigan game to me is inexcusable. But you look at where he is. He's the right guy for the job. We all have our faults. We take that first test. The progress report comes back. It's a 70. We say, okay, well, what do I need to work on? I got to get better at multiplication. So what do? You add more weapons to the receiver room. You do a great job of building a top-tier recruiting class, number 3 in the country. You bring back a Ryan Williams. You move Jalen Mbakwe from defense to offense. You bring in an Isaiah Horton, who would have been the number 1 at Miami. Now he's going to be the number 3 here. You have Cole Adams coming back fully healthy. You bring in more running back talent to replace what you're losing in Justice Haynes. You pair him alongside with Jam Miller. You upgrade your offensive line. You let players walk like Elijah Pritchett. You bring in guys like Cam Dewberry. You go trust the process and land a kid like Campbell that's coming on in from the IMG Academy and believing that he is going to be a day 1 starter. But there are still questions, and I understand that. And that's where, if you don't want to bet Alabama right now, okay, so be it. Who's QB1? Keelan Russell, Austin Mack, Ty Simpson. What do we get for the running back room? Who's going to step up with Jam Miller? Because that should be a point of emphasis when you look at this offense. How much more are we going to see of Kalen DeBoer's unit? The one that, made headlines and got to 11 wins in year 1 at Washington and then went to a national title appearance. How much more are we going to see from the younger guys getting a bigger role in the defense? Because all of these guys are DeBoer's players. So I'm not doubting the maturity of the locker room. I'm not doubting that they're going to continue to grow because I watched what happened in Seattle the last 2 years, and it was one of the best runs that Husky football has ever seen. But I am going to have my doubts when it comes to Alabama making it to Atlanta. And if you have your doubts, I totally understand it. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just beginning on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because FanDuel is your home for NBA live betting. Even if you miss the first few minutes of a game or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can make your picks from the first whistle until the final buzzer. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. However you want to play, now is the perfect time to join. New FanDuel customers get started with $150 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet win. Just visit FanDuel.com/SECU to join today. That's FanDuel.com/SECU for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Disclaimer: must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, and 18 plus in DC. First online real money wagers only. $5 first deposit is required. Bonus issues with non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after retreat. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. All right, back to the show. LSU at 1,000. This is one of those common themes to when I look at Vegas. They know what they're doing. Vegas is trying to pry you on it. It's a Venus flytrap. It's waiting on open. It's like, hey, look at what LSU's done. Look at what LSU has done this offseason. Brian Kelly, he's figuring some things out. You may want to go ahead and bet. Clap. Done. Then they go 9-3. And now they're not even going to the college football playoff. But here's the thing. Maybe, just maybe, LSU is finally built to win it all. There are real expectations out of Baton Rouge every single year. Compete for a conference title, win 10 football games, be in the hunt for the college football playoff, win a title with a new head coach every 5 years. And everyone has accomplished those goals. Ed Orgeron did it. Nick Saban did it. Les Miles did it when it was the BCS era. They were always constantly winning when it came to top victories against Alabama or Georgia or Florida. They were holding their own in the SEC. And Brian Kelly's done less with more. Or let me phrase that. Done more with less and less with more, actually. Look at the team that he built together in year one as the new head coach at LSU. Went and beat Nick Saban. Went to Atlanta, had a roster good enough to get to 10 wins, but not a good defense. Year two, better offense, better execution, a quarterback good enough to lead you to a national title, a defense that gets you out of the college football playoff. And so they've made adjustments, and Brian Kelly is figuring these things out. I am a Brian Kelly apologist, and I'm not going to apologize for that. He's too good to fail. He just is. We hear of all these coaches from time and time and time about how James Franklin can't win the big one, or how Ryan Day can't win the big one, or how Jim Harbaugh couldn't win the big one. And it took him 10 years to win a title down in Ann Arbor, the school that he wanted to bring poise to. And I say to myself, so you're going to tell me that Brian Kelly, who is the second most winningest coach currently in college football, can't get the job done at LSU? Guys, he's changed his ways. He has. I mean, look at this coaching staff right now. If you go through and see all the names that are on there, whether it be Blake Baker, Joe Sloan, Frank Harris, you throw in Lance Guidry they just added in from Miami. You throw in the brand new guy in Alex Atkins from Florida State to work with the offensive line. You know what they all have that is very common? Ties to the state of Louisiana. So every single five-star that walks into that building should be back at least a second time. And basically every single time a five-star says, I want to go to X school, the first thing should be LSU, and then what should I expect moving forward from another team to pay me an NIL? They have a returning ample talent at wide receiver. They brought in newcomers like Nick Anderson. They also keep back Aaron Anderson. I love the addition of what they bring in at tight end with Donovan Green. They also brought in a lot of defensive talent. It's year two underneath Blake Baker. This team should be on paper good enough to hoist up a national title, but it also is on paper. And I'm very skeptical of that because I thought 2 years ago they were good enough to win a national title, and they went 10-3. And I thought year one, when Brian Kelly came on down and he was able to get the best version of Jaden Daniels, that this team was going to be good. And you know what? They got to the SEC championship, and then they lost. So I'm very skeptical that it finally happens. They have a top 10 recruiting class. They got some young players like DJ Pickett and Solomon Thomas who should be day one starters. but I am going to be cautious with this one. What I'm not going to be is cautious with the next one, Ole Miss at plus 1,000. This, my friends, is my favorite play because at some point, we just have to embrace who Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin are. A flawed but fun team. And if I can get the benefit of the doubt to Tennessee, and I can get the benefit of the doubt to Alabama, and I can get the benefit of the doubt to LSU, I got to give it to Ole Miss. Look at what they get back next year. Austin Simmons for a quick cup of coffee in the Georgia game was exciting. He was awesome. He's a lot bigger than Jackson Dart, 6'4", like 225 pounds. He's got the same mobility. He's also got a cannon of an arm, and he's built that relationship with Caden Lee. They also rebuilt the wide receiver room with Deuce Alexander from Wake Forest, Harrison Wallace from Penn State, Caleb Odom from Alabama. Luke Haas comes in at tight end. That's a quarterback's best friend as a young player. It's a new and experienced offensive line. Like, it's brand new, but every single player that is there that's joining the team has at least 10 starts underneath their belt. They have a solid running back room. Defensively, they're in a very good spot. Yes, they're losing guys like Princely Uwin-Manley-Ellen, but Prince Will Uwin-Manley-Ellen is waiting in the wings to go ahead and start. So family tradition down in Oxford. And then I look at their schedule. And ladies and gentlemen, I don't think that you guys are paying enough attention to what Ole Miss's schedule is. They host Washington State without John Mateer, Tulane, LSU, South Carolina, and Florida. So one of those games that they lost last year in horrifying fashion, they get at home. They also get a Florida team that we don't know what to expect at home. They avoid Alabama, Tennessee, Texas, and Texas A&M, plus Auburn. Their two toughest road games are back-to-back weekends in October when they play against Oklahoma and Georgia. And if you're not a believer in Brett Venables, then you are a believer in Lane Kiffin. They should win that game. So split the series, go 5-1 at home this year, lose one other game, you're 10-2, you're in the college football playoff. And 10-2 at this point, when you look at Texas, when you look at Georgia, when you look at Alabama, LSU, here's the bottom line. I hate to break it to you, folks. That's good enough to get you to Atlanta. Who would be shocked if the year that we all decide to punt on Lane Kiffin, this is the one that finally works out? I wouldn't, and that's why I'm actually taking that play at plus 1,000 with FanDuel right now. Some quick hits right now. Texas A&M at plus 1,600. Here's the bottom line. I'll believe it when I see it. I think that they're in a good spot with Mike Elko. I like the defense. I like the offensive approach. I think they have some players that are going to hit their peak this year underneath Colin Klein offensively. But I've heard this song and dance so many times, I just got to see it to actually believe it. Same thing for South Carolina at plus 1,600. If you would ask me right now, I believe South Carolina is a playoff team. I believe defensively they've added in the right pieces in the personnel to make up for what they're losing to the NFL draft. And they got a special quarterback. Lenore Sellers is different. He is a one-of-one machine, and best of luck trying to slow him down. But I don't believe that right now they're a conference champion. I may feel differently about this after spring practice when I see the relationships with the wide receivers and the offensive line. But I do think that when you look at South Carolina, they could get to 9-3 or 10-2. And they sure as hell are going to ruin someone's chances. They play Alabama at home. They play LSU this year on the road. They play Ole Miss on the road this year. They could win two of those three games, knock both of them out of the college football playoff conversation while punching their ticket in and missing a shot at Atlanta. Missouri at plus 5,000. The disrespect of Vegas. Seriously, the disrespect of Vegas. Do you understand Missouri's schedule is literally one of the easiest in college football because of what they are enduring? They don't leave Como until mid-October. The first 6 games are at home. They feel good about the quarterback room with Bo Pabula coming on in from Penn State. I like the wide receiver room better than most. I think Kevin Coleman's going to break on out in Kirby Moore's system. On top of that, they also bring in Ahmad Hardy. If you haven't checked out his highlight reel, ladies and gentlemen, on a Saturday, if you're not interested in college basketball, just go ahead and watch what Ahmad Hardy did this past season at Louisiana Monroe. Phenomenal year, over 1,300 rushing yards. Stable offensive line. I thought that Corey Batoon did a phenomenal job replacing Blake Baker last year. They've added in some really good defensive players like Josiah Trotter from West Virginia. And their schedule is the same as last year. So instead of traveling to Columbia, South Carolina, to College Station, Texas, and to Bryant-Denny Stadium in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, they're going to be hosting those teams. So I'm talking about this Missouri squad that last year went 10-3 with a relaxed schedule. They could go 10-3 again this year with a relaxed schedule. And finally, Florida and Oklahoma. Florida comes in at plus 3,300. Oklahoma comes in at plus 6,000. I understand why you want to buy some stock into them. And you know what? I may or may not throw a little bit of money down on one of these teams. Which one of these teams? Probably you should just go ahead and like and subscribe, and we'll do a video on it. By the way, if you're still here watching, make sure that you hit the thumbnail, also the like button and the ring notification. That way you don't miss a single episode of SEC Unfiltered. They are quarterback based. Florida, you want to see more growth from DJ Lagway. You want buy-in and culture from what the team has done. You want to see more development from the offensive line, which was a very studious offensive line headlined by All-American Jake Slaughter. You want to see the defense take another step forward. I think that they will be fine with Ron Roberts running the show. I think that some of the players that they've added in from the transfer portal, very talented. I really think that when you look at Florida, so long as they get to 8 wins next year with a schedule that's basically the NFL's, that's good enough to say Billy Napier, the right guy, going into year 3 of DJ Lagway. We're okay with that. But I also could see where they hit their stride way too early. They get a few upset wins. And lo and behold, we're going into the final week of the college football season. And as long as they beat Florida State, they're punching their ticket to the college football playoff. And Oklahoma, I'm a believer in Brent Venables. Sue me. I like what he does defensively. I think he made a smart move going out and hiring Ben Arbuckle, who is air raid-esque, but not entirely the same way as Mike Leach, rest in peace. There's enough to like about what he does extremely well. And he's got the quarterback in John Mateer. I don't care if you play at FCS football level. If you score 45 touchdowns and put up over 4,000 total yards of scrimmage, plus you add that mobility and a good understanding of the relationship of what the offense wants to be, I'm going to have faith in you. I like what they brought in at wide receiver with Isaac Satenga. I like that they have Deion Burks back. I think the offensive line will be better underneath Bill Beatonbow in year 2 of the SEC. They got some young players that are going to have to step on up. But I like this team. I think they're in a very good spot.